things. I remember Aimee. I mean, I was thinking about it earlier today and thinking we had a cast of 29 and an orchestra of 24. And we had Jimmy Dale doing the orchestrations and Alan Lund directing. I mean, it was just, that's as high as you can get as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, you said it. Right?
Yes, in 1978, I did 8 to the Bar and then Lies and Other Lyrics in the Mackenzie building.
You did them both.
Yes,
Right. But of course,
What?
8 to the Bar was Joey Miller's
Oh,
music,
yeah,
but you were MDing.
I was MDing the 8 to the Bar and
Right.
and also my own show. And then in 79, then in 79, I and Janelle Hutchison wrote a show called The Family Way.
Right.
And so that was produced again in the Mackenzie building with, again, I musical directed and played the show, and also 8 to the Bar for the second year. Yeah.
And that's how I got to know Bob, from his doing all those things. Because I was there playing Edward VIII in Windsor, David Warwick's show in 78, and then back to do On a Summer's Night in 79, playing Demetrius in the version of Midsummer Night's Dream. And I got to really admire this guy who's sitting next to me.
Oh, thank you.
And by that time I had, yes, my very first play, which was a one-man show about Winston Churchill, using mostly his words, was running in the same summer in 79.
Yes.
And after winning a couple of awards, and
well deserved, I will say.
Oh, thank you, thank you. It wasn't even a musical, but I had reached the point in the Lehman Engel classes about musical writing. I'd completed all the exercises a year or so later, except the final one, which was to start adapting a story into a musical. And it could be a novel, or it could be a biography, or it could be whatever. And it must have been about 81 or 80. 81, I think, already, when I sat in my living room with a friend who was a bit of a history aficionado. And I said, okay, I've got this assignment now. I have to outline and start working on a musical that's about, I'm looking for an interesting Canadian woman that would make a good musical. What do you think? And we're sitting there brainstorming, thought this, and all of a sudden he said, what about Aimee Semple McPherson? I went, you just hit it. That's who I want to write about, because I knew that story already. And of course, I hadn't researched it seriously. So I started digging in right then. And did you take the Lehman Engel classes too?
Oh, yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I can't remember whether we were in them at the same time.
I can't remember.
I don't remember, but I knew Bob because of the Charlottetown work. And once it started looking like it might have some legs, I contacted him and I said, would you consider writing this with me? Because I love your work, and I think we could do something together. And to my amazement, me working on my first musical and him being a veteran of so many, he said yes. So
Best
thereby
decision.
hangs the tale.
best decision I ever made. It was a joy to work on it, honest to God. True collaboration, that it was wonderful.
Because it won the Eric Harvey Award that year. And that was a newly funded award that only lasted a few years. And the funding was for a workshop. It did indeed have a workshop. And we did the workshop with 13 or 14 actors and a piano. And it was a busy time for them all, but it was super. And I remember a lot of people came to see the final run through, sitting on the floor in the rehearsal hall. I do not remember how we solved all the limitations, but it got done. I don't remember huge alterations, but I know that there were many, many useful small ones after that, and that and Alan got inspired by it to add some things and suggest some things. So I know that the news girls who helped to change the scenery and introduce things and so on, they were totally an Alan Lund invention. And I was a little iffy about them, but they I think they came up after that workshop. Then we found ourselves sitting down across the table, or I found myself, you again were busy. I found myself sitting across the table from high-powered lawyers in marble offices.
Oh, I was, yes.
You were there for one of those, I
Yes,
think,
they were like the
sessions.
52nd floor of the Bank of Montreal building at Bay and
Terrifying negotiations.
Bay and King. Oh, yes,
Yeah.
I remember we had it, and there was like maybe, I don't know, 40 pages or something of this contract. We had to initial every page.
Yeah,
It
it was pretty wild. Holding the, if we had agreed to everything that was being asked for, it would have changed the course of Playwrights Guild contracts for the next 100 years. So, but we held the line, and I think we ended up with something that was fairly standard.
Well, I mean, I can't comment much on that because I didn't play rehearsals. I was just the composer and would hang out with Jimmy Dale, the orchestrator, and so I didn't have much contact with Alan for that. But I'm sure you did incessantly.
I was in rehearsal the whole time, yeah, and that wasn't my choice. I would have been much happier to go away for a few days and then come back and see a sequence run and make some suggestions and so on. But I'm not quite sure why Alan was so determined to have me there all the time. I think there was an angle of directing that I think Alan was shy about. And I think he wanted me there to keep an eye on the acting specifically.
Really?
Although I personally always found him a wonderful actor's director, because he'd make a physical suggestion that just opened a whole scene for you. It was always brilliant. And I watched him work in the workshop, and he did it over and over again. He'd say, well, what do you want in this scene? What are you after? And he wouldn't have read the script. He'd just ask the actors what was going on. And he'd say, oh, in that case, let's this, you move there, you do that. Yeah. And it would all just open up, and there it would be. And we had some debates about certain things. He wanted to soften. The thing that I was most disturbed about, that I never really agreed to, and which I put back promptly when the run was over, was that he changed the ending. He insisted on changing the ending. Not, it just didn't have the impact that I had wanted it to have. And there were other little things. Losing the verse for Marilyn Pepiet's wonderful.
Yeah,
That's my
the
girl.
opening verse.
Yeah.
But
See,
sometimes you
cuts
just
do
at
happen.
the moment you just have to let these things go. And but I never felt that was right. And if you ever see a video or listen to the original, the program sound from the production, you'll notice at the end of "That's My Girl," the applause is chopped. It goes
Straight into,
as soon as she hits,
straight
it comes
into
off
tempo number.
the last lyric, and there's no room for applause. I don't know if there's a button at the end of the song. I don't think so, but it segues as one to something else.
Right.
You know, yeah. But anyway, I guess it affects me because I found that. Help me with the name. Who sang it?
Marilyn Pepiet.
Marilyn Pepiet was so wonderful, and
Yeah.
she owned that song, and she just. It was just wonderful what she did with it, and to not give her due, sorry, but it every time I think of it, I get a little upset.
Do you remember her audition? Where we had done demoed some numbers before all of this started, when we had Sharon Dyer singing the part of Minnie Kennedy, the mother of Aimee Semple McPherson, and she'd done a fabulous job as Sharon would. But you know, she was ill, and her health didn't really permit looking at a run of a play at that point. And so we were searching for a Minnie Kennedy, and I had never heard of Marilyn Pepiet.
I hadn't either.
I didn't, you know, she was well known from an earlier stage of her career, and in other circles, the name Pepiet meant something. But she walked in, and here was this handsome, broad-shouldered woman with a bass voice, and she sang, "Here's to the ladies who lunch,"
Oh my God.
and tore a strip off it. And Alan and I looked at each other, and we knew we had Minnie Kennedy. It was just absolutely 100%. There was just no question. There was no point in any other woman coming in that door.
She owned the stage.
Yeah,
She owned it.
totally owned it.
Now Gabriel needs a cheer, the heavenly hosts in our world. They all know. Could I crow? You bet your life, St. Peter. That's my girl.
The two of us would sit and talk about what a song was about, where it came up in the story, what needed to happen in the song, where it needed to go to. But I always tried to talk him into writing the music first, and we'd have the final, like the hook or the final punchline at the end, because I loved to fit the words to his music and try to be exact. Whereas if I was just writing doggerel verse and counting on him to, it was
But-
different, you know, it didn't feel as organic to me to go at it that way.
And that's why when I said earlier about the wonderful collaboration, I mean, it's just the back and forth. You change, I change this, you change that. It was wonderful.
One of my big questions, there is a ballad. Aimee's most powerful emotional song,
When There Was a Man.
When There Was a Man. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I want to look for a way. I think at the moment, it only comes up at the end of Act 1. And I believe that that should be a reprise and that it really needs to come up in the early scenes. You have the opening song, which is called Thank God for That. I think it's suitable. But somewhere between there and the arrival of Minnie Kennedy on the scene, I think Once There Was a Man needs to come in, and it needs to be her daughter who occasions that, needing to know about her father. Because in essence, it's the want song, except it's the want song that she doesn't understand is the want song. The song that she understands is the want song, comes along in the next scene with the credo, I know he needs me. But now she's talking about God, not a man. Yeah, so that is something I've always wanted to wrestle with. And there are other tweaks.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that the ending remains strong. That is, at the ending, she's once again singing, I know he needs me, despite the lie that her life has turned into. And one needs to realize, and we didn't lose this, this was the on-screen notation that she died by an overdose of sleeping pills some years after the end of the play. One needs to realize that she's going to be living a delusional existence. I think Alan was a little bit afraid of it in the context of a fairly religious community. I remember him saying that he fought so hard to get this part, and he was wonderful in it. He had one lovely number that I loved very much. Spare Me the Saints was the title of it. Charm song. And he was just the right presence. He was just warm and simple and genuine, and that fabulous voice of his. Yeah, he was just lovely in it.
I heard a story about Spare Me the Saints and Bill. He said he had said to someone that it was the hardest song he ever had to learn.
Oh, wow.
Because it's just the intervals that he has to sing, you know, which are, you know, maybe I can't remember, maybe major sevenths, and he has to drop it or find them, and rhythmically it was a little bit and some key changes, you know.
I never knew that.
Yeah, that's it. I can't remember who told me that.
Maida, we had a heck of a search, because when I was writing the show, I had in mind Sherry Flatt as my Aimee. But Sherry, by the time we were doing the workshop, Sherry already had received an offer from the Stratford Festival to play 2 leads with Len Cariou in that season, and that was pretty hard to say no to. So we were on a terrible search for an Aimee who would feel right in the role. And we saw a lot of ladies and saw some really interesting auditions. And finally, Alan gave up and said, I can't, you know, there's women here that I would love to write a musical for, but none of them fit the one you've written. I said, yeah, I know. He said, you keep going, Patrick, and let me know who you finally find. I don't remember if you were, how much of this you were in on, not a lot.
I might have been, but my memory is.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I saw several more people. And then Maida Rogerson walked in. Well, one of my concerns with the part of Aimee was just something about the poise of the character that I thought was necessary to make it work. And nobody was quite capturing that, or if they were capturing it, they couldn't sing it. So Maida walked in and she had that. She had the poise of a lady, the presence of a lady, and yet she was down to earth and genuine. And she could carry the tunes. And I contacted Alan and I said, I think we found her. And so, and then, only then did I discover that she was an island girl. Yeah, she was born and bred on PEI. Any rate, that's what happened, and she was marvelous in the part. She was warm and genuine and feisty, and all of those things worked.
Yeah, and she was great to work with too. I remember.
Yeah, lovely woman, very
Yeah,
charming,
yeah.
very charming
Yeah.
woman. Well, we were writing, we were in those days still writing what now are old-fashioned musicals, but they can be done differently. But it's a matter of both the playwriting structure and the style of music. They want to be reinterpreted. I mentioned that, well, we had a cast of 29,
Yes.
24 in the orchestra, but in workshop, we had 13, 14 actors and a piano. I loved that version. That was, for me, the play. And everybody changing parts like mad and so on.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a radically different way of presenting essentially the same material that would, it does not by any means have to be done to that scale in that way. It's not necessary.
Well, musically, I mean, from what I've seen, I haven't seen a lot of live theater in the last while. But or live musicals. But from what I've seen on, on online or on TV, is that it's all now so glamorous and very quickly paced, and it's I don't know, it's the story I want, and I'm not sure that it is. I'm not sure how important that is anymore.
I got you.
It's because I always feel, well, okay, an audience. I read in a book once, the most important people in the theater is the audience, and that performers are there for the audience, to enlighten the audience or to make them feel good. And if people now, if they're just happy to see a great dance number or a wonderful busy loud score, then they're pleasing the audience. But I think I don't know, for the musical theater, I want some heart there. I want some story,
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Story is the important thing to me, and that's
Yeah.
why I said that it could be done again with just over a dozen people and a small ensemble, because the story, I think the songs carry the emotion in any guise. If there's some damn challenging songs in there, mind you, but the Bob's melodies do the work. I think the scenes are, I might tweak them, but I think the scenes are pretty good. They tell the story. They get at what I was aiming to get at. And I think a different approach could work really nicely. It'd be lovely to work with the director who wanted to play around with it and find transitions that didn't involve tap dancing.
Yeah.
Leggy news girls.
Opening night to me was absolutely wonderful. I came out of the theater just in seventh heaven. And also, I have to say, working with Jimmy Dale, and he had a wonderful way to work. And I remember I used to hang out with him a lot, and we'd go for lunch, we'd just, drinks, whatever. And so one day he said to me, I guess you think I'm not working on the show. He said, I am. And he would just go to rehearsals, sit halfway up the seating, and just listen and watch and so on and so forth. And then he said, but then at that lunch, he said, come back to my hotel with me and I'll show you what I'm ready to do something. He had his orchestra sheets with all the instruments listed. He said, okay, I'm going to do this tune today. He started at the flutes at the top, and he looked at my lead sheets basically, and just would turn the page and write a little more flute, and turn the page back. Then he'd do perhaps the oboe, and he'd write that. He had it all orchestrated in his head first before, and it was just wonderful. It was wonderful.
Well, I remember that opening night too. It was utterly terrifying to me. There were millions of dollars had been spent on everything to do with a production that I started. That, that I had no precedent for that. That had never happened to me before. And they had given me a complimentary seat, and it was dead center in the center of the house. And I don't know if you remember how the Confederation Center used to be laid out, but it was this long, long, long continuous aisle with no aisle until the very end.
At each side.
At each end, nothing in between. And all my relatives had been invited, and they all had tickets in that row. And I thought, how the hell am I ever going to get through this? I went to the theater bar in the, what was it called? No, never mind. I went to the theater bar. I ordered a tumbler of scotch full to the brim. I chug-a-lugged it, and that's how I got through opening night.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. It was a crazy experience. I have, one of my favorite moments, other than Marilyn starting into "That's My Girl," was Bill Hosey starting in "I Confess I'm a Man Who Has Lived a Bit." And then, do you remember in the Sun newspaper an eccentric reviewer named Mackenzie Porter?
Yes.
I'm sure you remember him. Well, his review, I will never forget. What was that? Young writes lyrics that fit into the tunes of Bob Ashley, like a hand in a glove, et cetera, et cetera. He went on and on. He figured it was the next big Broadway hit. And I didn't take it as realism, but it sure was nice.
Well, of course, yes. The whole experience of having it produced on that scale was one of the highlights of my career, really. How many Canadian composers have that opportunity? It's plus we got royalties.